My son's twice exceptional, gifted, and ADHD, and will not memorize his multiplication facts. And a lot of that is that we always do flashcards. And so I'm sure that's part of an image in your brain. Evidently, he does not have aphantasia. I don't know. We're all a conundrum over here, but he can, he said he has a whiteboard where he can just do math.
Want to support the podcast? You can purchase fun and unique items like t-shirts and books at shanesbraindomain.com. Pop on over and take a look. Thank you for supporting the Discovering Your Mind podcast. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain, and today we are talking about aphantasia, visualization, and education. I have several guests with me today for this discussion, and I'm grateful for each one of them for taking the time to do this with me today. So welcome, everybody. How are you doing?
Well, fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to have each one of you introduce yourselves. Please tell us about your experience in the realm of education, your background, your career, etc., and why you are interested in joining in on this discussion today. Also, let us know your familiarity with aphantasia and or the mind's eye in general. Let's start with Sarah.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Sarah Pett. I own a company called SPF Staging Homes, but I am not an educator, so I am going to be different than everyone else, I assume. I think most of you are educators in one form or another, but I think part of the reason that I'm on in this discussion is because my background with education is very different than what is normal and traditional. I was homeschooled, or as I like to say, kept home from school. Some people are really well taught at homeschool. I wasn't. And so pretty much everything I know was self-taught, and I've had to rely really heavily on visualization and imagery and things like that to learn concepts that weren't being taught to me, that I had to learn and figure out on my own. And so I have quite a passion for educating myself and educating the people around me and exploring different ways of teaching and learning. And so this has been a really fascinating topic for me to recognize how people do learn differently and how, being able to visualize or have an image in your mind about something can impact education. Did I miss something else that you wanted me to go over?
Well, just that you are hyperphantasia, correct?
Oh, yes. And I am hyperphantasia. So I do see things in great detail.
Just for everybody, if you're not familiar with that term. So on one end of the scale, we have aphantasia, which is not being able to visualize at all. And that's where I am personally. And hyperphantasia is on the other end of the spectrum, where what you visualize is very vivid and almost like real life. Right, Sarah?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. And then everything in between as well. But those are the two extremes. All right, Dawn, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Dawn Rosbeck. I retired from teaching about 4 years ago. I taught art to high school and middle school students. And currently now I am a full-time artist, and I co-own a gallery with a couple of friends of mine. And I have zero visualization, so zero on the scale, I guess, as far as aphantasia goes. And I'm currently working on a grant project, actually finishing it up, to do with aphantasia and being an artist, because the first question that gets asked to me is, how can you be an artist if you have aphantasia? Because once they find out what this is. And so the whole goal of my project, my grant project, is just to bring awareness, especially to those people like teachers and like therapists who use visualization either in in their terminology or in their practice.
Very cool. Thank you. All right, Chantelle.
I'm a full Aphant in all senses. I teach post-16. I'm unable to work due to disability, but my little bit of giving back. I do 2 hours a week and I teach British Sign Language. And again, I've had lots of people say to me, how can you possibly learn a visual language when you can't picture it in your mind? It's a very fascinating subject, isn't it?
It sure is.
And I think I teach differently because of it.
All right. Very good. We'll get more into that later. All right, Stacey.
I'm Stacey Williams. I am a special education teacher. I've been teaching for 10 years. I am very hyperphantasia also. I can see just anything I want to in my head.
All right, go ahead, Marika.
Yeah, so I'm Marika. I have aphantasia. I can't visualize anything for the life of me. I've only known since I was about in my early 30s. I'm 42 now, so not for very long. Kind of knew I was different, but not to the extent. Kind of feel like everyone has superpowers that I don't have. I'm new to the education sector, so I'm just starting my journey into education support. So I'll be starting a new job next term.
All right, on to Lindsay.
So I am a third grade teacher, also am an activist for equitable education for neurodivergent learners. I work with the National Education Association's Leaders for Just Schools program, trying to increase the education of general ed teachers on neurodivergent learning. Honestly, I had never heard of aphantasia before I got your request, but I did a deep dive into it and realized that I don't see pictures in my head when I close my eyes, but I also have an eidetic memory, which baffled the internet. I can remember things, but they're verbal. So like I can hear descriptions of things, I just can't see them. So I'm still trying to research and understand that better. But I am also AUDHD, and so I've been doing the research also on how it appears to be connected with that.
Okay, very cool. So you can hear your thoughts in your mind, but you don't visualize?
There's always like verbal stimulation. And so like I can close my eyes and like the way that other people see things, like I can hear them. So I can like verbally think about what something looks like, but I don't see it. And then I can remember all of the things that were said. Or I can remember like if I put something, you know, like in the basement under some pillow and book, like I'll remember that that's where it is, but I won't see it.
Okay, so that memory will come in verbally as well?
Yes.
Okay, very cool. So are you familiar with the Apple test or the Apple graph? Have you ever seen that in your deep dive?
They're in my deep dive. When I close my eyes, it's just black. And according to the internet, you cannot have aphantasia and have an eidetic memory. But
yeah, there's no rules. There's no rules.
So
no, really not.
That is really interesting. All right, let's go on to Kristin.
Hi, I'm Kristin Erickson. I am a little bit different, I think, than maybe some of you that I work at a university level versus like a K-12 level. I teach in a clinical mental health counseling program at a private university in Nebraska, Bellevue University. Absolutely love it there. Been here since 2017. Started out, though, in doing biofeedback. And so I used a lot of imagery exercises as part of biofeedback and the training that we worked with that was in a medical setting with chronic pain patients. And I loved it. It was wonderful. And fabulous. And then I went back to school for my counseling master's degree. And then I worked for child psychologists after that and worked in clinical mental health counseling. And then I have done some private practice. When I was in school, was in a hospice setting as well as a prison setting. And so I've done a wide variety of things, even worked in a church setting. But imagery is something that I've used as a counselor for years and years, and in teaching for years and years. I taught before I went back for my doctoral degree in counseling. I worked as a college mental health counselor. That was my main gig. And so I was one day trying to figure out how to combine all my interests of teaching. I was teaching stress management at an undergrad level and interpersonal communication, and just loved them. And so I was like teaching, and I was supervising students in counseling. And then I'm like, gosh, there's gotta be a way to combine these. And somebody's like, oh yeah, a counselor education supervision course, doctoral program would be wonderful. And so that's the route I went. And as part of my work using imagery so much and loving it, one of the reasons I am here is because when I learned a couple years ago what aphantasia is, and I was actually getting ready to do an imagery presentation, and there was one piece that I thought, oh, I wonder what the research says about this, the current research. And so when I looked it up, and in the process of looking that up, came across aphantasia, going, oh, what's that? How come I haven't heard of that? And so I went and I looked up the article, read all this information, absolutely was floored when I realized that, you mean there's people who actually see images when they close their eyes? That was something that never occurred to me at all, ever, because I close my eyes and it's just black. But I love imagery so much, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? How can I use imagery and love it so much and have it be really effective for me and helpful for me and effective for so many clients that I have worked with and patients over the years, and students as well. And it was just like my whole world was kind of turned upside down. And for a moment, I wondered if that's what it might have been like when people had learned that the world was not flat. I mean, it just really floored me. But I think one of the reasons I'm here is because it's something that I want to start, helping counselors know, because that's what I do. I teach master students, counselors how to be counselors. We do use imagery. And so I want to be able to let them know. So I approach things very differently since learning about aphantasia, but it is something that I'm now passionate about just because I love imagery, and I still don't have a lot of answers with things, but I am passionate about it, and I'm excited to be here and be involved with these conversations and just see where they go.
All right. Very cool. So I'm just curious real quick. You say you love imagery, but you have aphantasia. So define imagery to you. Like, what is imagery to you? Because to Sarah and to Stacey, that's something way different, right?
Right.
Yeah, right. And I think some of the things I am noticing since I'm learning about it is just an increased awareness of how much our words and the things that we use to describe things, including terms like imagery or visualization, and what does it mean to one person versus another, or, that you might see some slightly different ways to define that. But I've always seen imagery as being able to close your eyes and just for a moment use your imagination to be able to visualize an image in your mind. So when they had talked about it being in your mind's eye, I'm like, oh yeah, I love that because I resonate with that. And so what's fascinating about it for me is I've always just thought of imagery and this is what I thought most people thought of imagery, is that you are just using your imagination to be able to create images in your mind of what you would see if you could see it. That's the part, because I didn't know people actually could see.
Right. Okay.
It goes to that word imagination again, though. Everyone uses that word differently. I use it differently now that I know I have aphantasia than I did before. So before I would use it all the time, and now I limit myself on how I'm using it because I realize other people are actually using it differently.
Correct. Yeah.
To mean something else.
Yes. In my teaching, when I was teaching art, often used things which I just thought they were metaphors, like, imagine this picture in your head,
Right.
and that was a metaphor for me, and so I taught 24 years using that terminology because I didn't know I had aphantasia until like the last year or so that I was teaching. And then that was during COVID, and well, who was paying attention to anything at that moment?
So real quick to start, I want to read a page that is in my wife's, one of my wife's training manuals. And it's a tad long, but I want to read it because I think it's really important to hear what is being presented and given to teachers as training. We can talk about maybe what's good about it, what's missing. And then I've written just a little disclaimer, or not disclaimer, but a little note that I think should be included in some of this training at the very least. It says, one way to activate meaning connections to the text base is through guided visualization. Model by describing your own mental images after reading aloud a passage. Describe to the students what these images make you see, think, and feel. Ask students to see the setting, situation, character, or event as it is described. Tell them to pretend that they are making a movie or painting a picture as they read or listen to the words. Have them describe what they are seeing in their own minds that may not be fully described in the text itself. Ask questions to promote visualization. Remind students that their visualizations should make sense in relation to the text. What does this place look like? How would you describe the appearance of the character? How is the character looking right now? What is the expression on this character's face? Tell me how you imagine this scene. Ask students to share details about their mental images with one another. Have them describe what it makes them think and feel. As time allows, have students illustrate their own mental images inspired by the text with drawings and or materials. Ask students to explain the thoughts and feelings they had in creating these images. Okay, so that's the training, and this is the note that I would add. Please note, not all people can see in their minds. This is called aphantasia. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. It is also important to consider that even among those who can visualize, wide variations of ability and vividness are experienced. Do not assume that your students are visualizing in the exact same way that you are. All right, so I just want to open that up to discussion. Anything you'd like to say about the training or about my note? Let's go.
So when I first heard this, I'm like, yes, this is exactly what my concern has been ever since I learned about aphantasia. And that is that you're asking a child to speak in Chinese when they've only ever known to speak in Spanish, and then grading them on it. You're asking them to do something that they may not even be capable of doing and not even comprehend the instruction because it's not a part of their reality. It's not something they've ever experienced. And I get that there's a scale and some don't see any at all. And some, but that's kind of the point. Everyone's going to get a different grade based on what they're capable of doing physiologically and not something that they're learning from an assignment, which is kind of what education is about. There should be more of a level playing field. And so I'm very curious about how could this assignment be, given in a different way where it would level the playing field? How could someone who can't see anything in their mind, still participate and benefit from, what visualization does for people who are able to see images without having to actually see it in their own mind? I have some ideas, but I'm very curious for educators, what and especially people who have aphantasia, what would have helped you to do an assignment like this without visualization?
I think, especially in America, you definitely have to understand that the statement that the way that we're teaching things often aren't presented or implemented in a way that all learners can have access to. Like, that's just a blanket statement right now for most of the American education system. I don't know about other places. What I do in my classroom is, if that's an assignment, it's one assignment or one way of doing the assignment, because you have to have multiple access points to the information. And so I think that the overarching point is that we need to begin to design a school system that meets kids where they are and grows them from there, and get rid of the idea that all children learn the same, and that whether it's aphantasia, whether it's neurodivergence, whether it's culture, trauma, language, you name it, we need to move away from this idea that one size fits all and really help our students to be able to advocate and talk about how they learn. Because as a kid, I was diagnosed with ADHD when my teacher tied me up to a chair. So I've been through it. This topic is really important to me, that we are creating equitable education experiences for our students. I remember being forced to close my eyes and use my pretend rainbow wand to write words in the air. And I always kind of wondered, like, what is everybody else seeing? Because I don't really know what we're doing right now. But like as a kid, I didn't know how to say that.
I think that the material itself is more of a thinking exercise, and so the exercise in itself is okay. And even though it's not geared towards people with aphantasia, there's other ways that they could scaffold that by giving them two options, perhaps, rather than scrapping it all together, because it's going to be beneficial for some people, just not beneficial for everyone. So they perhaps be having alternative modes of things going on at the same time.
Yes, folks are talking. Something that came to mind for me were a couple things, like, where Shane has the addition of like the please note. It might be after that to also include some suggestions to take time to talk about what the experience was and how you might need to adapt, or to have some alternative suggestions down there, like 3 or 4 different ways of doing the same exercise, especially if they know certain things about students. But for me, I might even just like take time to provide suggestions to tweak the actual description. So maybe it'd be starting out like, some individuals can visualize really easily and some individuals struggle. Everybody is a little bit different. There's no wrong or right. But for a moment, see what your experience is, and we'll talk about this later. Or something that's like, I guess you could say a little disclaimer or something that helps prepare that you could have a different experience than somebody else. Or even if you don't say something like that, when it says model by describing your own mental images, that it might even be able to say, like when they say, what do you see, think, and feel? During that time to be able to say, and you might not see things, but take note of what you're feeling as we're describing this, because there's still things you can learn from that.
I'm wondering if maybe you could answer, if you have aphantasia too, would it be helpful to have a supplement or starting point for anything where visualization is going to be part of an assignment, where they show the image, a very detailed image of, this is a starting point. If you want to change the color of the sky in this image, or you want to change that in your mind, you want to be creative, you want to make changes to this image, fine. Or if not an actual image, at least a very detailed description of what they are hoping you to get to at some point. I think the difference that I'm getting at is when you hand someone an assignment like this, for some people, you're literally handing them a blank page, and for other people, you're handing them an art studio, and it's just not the same. It's just not the same, And so giving them a more middle ground of, here's a description, here's an image, here's why we're doing this. We're trying to, develop creativity, for example, which I'm always a little confused why every subject in school requires art and creativity and visualization and all of that. I know it's a helpful tool, but sometimes it's not applicable to history, math, or science, or other things, but they're being graded on how well they are artistically, as well as whether or not they comprehend a concept in math or science or history. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense? And so I think sometimes because it's helpful to someone who has, a hyper ability to visualize things, we just put it in everything. But it may be a stumbling block for kids to learn in other subjects. Does that make sense?
Yeah, speaking of art, I would have loved art more in school for myself if I had have had things I could copy. So, like, I can draw things if I can sit and copy it, or there's step-by-step instructions. But when they told me, just create an image from your mind and draw it, it's like, yeah, well, give me a stick figure.
And
I'm not seeing
honestly,
anything.
like I said, I'm highly visual. You ask me to come up and draw something, anything, I can be looking at it, and I'm not drawing it. It's very basic. But if you tell me to come up with something from my mind and draw it, that's not happening at all.
Well, but that's exactly to my point, is like, if your grade is going to be based on how well you do with imagining something or expressing that in art, what my fear is, sometimes teachers think that how well they do at visualizing things or how well they do at expressing that through art is somehow a reflection on their intelligence or capabilities and learning, and that's just not true.
And I want to clarify something with this training. This isn't about an assignment necessarily. What this is these are just teaching comprehension techniques. I mean, we're talking, there's a whole section about background information and teaching vocabulary and things like that. This is one of the techniques. It usually starts literally like in kindergarten with read alouds, where the teacher's reading and she's asking them to picture this in your mind so that they can see if they can come up with this mental picture. It's not usually like, okay, you're now graded on whatever art project you turn in. So it's just, like I said, we teach several different comprehension techniques. This is just one that I've struggled with my kids, just because I look at it and I'm like, I don't even know, because knowing Shane, I don't even know if my kids can visualize. Some of them, I have English language learners. I have kids who are very low cognitively. I have all kinds, and I don't know what they're, and the problem is I've tried, like, I would like to ask some of them, so can you visualize? But they're at the point where I could say, so raise your hand if you have a dog, and the whole class is raising their hand. And I'm like, we don't all have dogs. So there are some of them, my kids like that are in 3rd and 4th and 5th grade, and some even in 2nd, where I'm like, okay, you guys I can probably talk to about this. But some of my kindergartners and 1st graders and stuff, I'm like, I wouldn't know if you were actually, even, you could say yes, you could say no. You're just cute.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that this question for me came from an experience I had with my daughter when she was young and going through school. And we both, it's just a long-standing joke with us, the apple tree poster. We were given an assignment for a class that was not art. And the assignment was to create a poster based on a historical figure. And I don't even remember. This tells you how much the lesson actually made it into the process. Is I can't even tell you who the figure was. We don't remember anything that was probably a history lesson. All we remember is staying up till 2:00 in the morning to create the most realistic apple tree that has ever been put on a poster. We had apples that were like on springs, so they would wobble if you like waved the poster, and some that would drop off and fall to the ground attached to a string if you tilted it the right way. I mean, and so our realistic picture of an apple became just this nightmare project. And I remember when she turned it in, and we just felt so much pressure. Our personality types are that way too, to just go above and beyond, do more than you have to, whatever. We turned it in, and there was another kid that had just, scribbled a little picture of an apple, and we were like, that kid's going to get an A, and we're going to get an A. And the difference between the effort is just astounding, but it really has made an impact on me on when you give someone an assignment, what they see and what they think is being expected of them and what they're capable of doing is so vastly different. And I think, what if that child had gotten an F because we got an A? What if they're being graded on a curve? What if they're comparing, how much effort and energy and thought and visualization, whatever you put into it? And when the assignment was really just a history lesson about somebody who had a thing for apple trees, I don't know, it's just, I think there needs to be some thought about the assignments they're given and what the expectations are from those assignments,
we don't grade like that anymore. Everything for the most part is mastery based. So like we wouldn't give a project and then grade it based on, at least in Ohio, there's very few teachers that I know that send projects home. And that's why America needs to move away from this idea of one size fits all and have these individualized pathways, be able to make learning an experience that benefits you. And so I hope that teachers aren't still giving projects like that. I know for sure I am not.
Spread laughter all around with funny and witty t-shirts from Shane's Brain. Check out fan favorites like Once in a Blue Moon, Tired of Laundry, and the Ramalama Ding Dong shirts, all on shanesbraindomain.com.
Going back to the comprehension piece, there's some pretty beginning research that comprehension and aphantasia may not be all that great. And that was my low area on testing, was comprehension. And in fact, when I had to do a lot of, when I was studying for my art history tests, I would cram with a stack of index cards, just constantly, just rote memorization, to try and remember this for this test, and in some areas I could test, okay, but some things I just had to just put it in my brain for hours at a time just to pass a test, and I think about, okay, what about like if a spelling, if there's a spelling bee and somebody like you guys who can pull up a word and you can see it, all you have to do is read off the letters. For me, I'm a good speller, but I have to think about it, and go across, I'm accessing the information different. And then it's like, is that a level playing field? I don't know. If you can just flip to the dictionary page and go, oh, there it is, So I think about the National Spelling Bee and I'm like, I think that's rigged,
Yeah. My husband always said I was cheating in college because I have a photographic memory and I could just pull up my notes and read them.
Right.
And he was like, that's cheating. And I'm like, I can't help it. So I'm not going to read the notes if they're there.
You think about all the testing, in school, whether it's first grade or a senior or college level, it's like, I'm not sure if that's the best approach,
Yeah, I agree. I think testing for me is one of the big ones because I struggled all throughout school, and testing was one of the biggest things. Like, how am I going to remember this stuff? It felt like they were testing my memory more than they were testing my ability to learn or knowledge about something. It was a memory test a lot of times. And so when I look back on why I struggled in school, aphantasia definitely played a role. It wasn't the only thing, but it was a thing that I think hindered me. And back to Sarah's point is, without this knowledge, we start labeling it. Oh, he's lazy, or he's not smart, or he, instead of the truth of he's got a different way of working. He doesn't have the art studio. He's got a blank sheet of paper. It's understanding those differences, and we're all different. Even all of us with aphantasia, we're still all very different from each other.
I was also going to say that the aphantasia is probably another piece of, with math and memorizing of multiplication facts, that can also be a hindrance in education. My son's twice exceptional, gifted, and ADHD, and will not memorize his multiplication facts. And a lot of that is that we always do flashcards. And so I'm sure that's part of an image in your brain. Evidently, he does not have aphantasia. I don't know. That we're all a conundrum over here, but he can, he said he has a whiteboard where he can just do math. And so, but he won't memorize it. Like, if you ask him what's 8 times 6, he'll take a minute and he'll tell you. But if he takes a timed math test, he won't do it. And so I think that there's so many different things about the fact that we all learn differently, and offering multiple facets of education, and then even having visual pieces to the art, when Dawn was talking about the art, I remembered when I took art history, I used to figure out different things within the picture that would help stimulate my brain to remember the date. So like, say there were 9 stars, right? I'd be like, all right, well, there's the 9 that I need to remember. And so although I can't generate visions in my mind, I'm able to manipulate visual things into scaffolds for myself once I see the picture.
Yes.
Like when I present, everything's a picture. I don't have any words on the screen because I just use the picture to stimulate what I know I want to say. And so I think that this is an amazing conversation, that if we can think about all of those different strategies that kids with or without aphantasia have, I mean, this is a really important part of moving forward in education.
Yeah, I don't know much about the American system, but in Australia we do have a lot of crossover. So there's like visual, textual, this like auditory, oral, tactile learners. And so as an education support, the teacher will do the lesson, but also have all of those elements. So catering to all different kinds of people, which I didn't have when I was growing up, which would have been so much more helpful. So my job in the classroom is really like, I just zero in on those kids that are kind of like I was, who are just struggling. So whether they have aphantasia or not is another story, but they might have other kinds of learning areas. But just giving them the tools that I didn't have, whether that's writing it down if that's easy for them, or giving them pictorial clues, or giving them alternate methods like scaffolding for them, and just needs to be more. But doesn't always translate to the testing at the end.
So one of the things that my daughter and I have always said, I don't know if it's just a British thing or not, but we have always said, if you're going to test a goldfish by how well it can climb a tree, you're never going to find out how clever it is. And that was very much what my experience of school and my daughter's experience of school was. We were just literally fish out of water and couldn't cope. Another thing that I think is really quite interesting is there was a study done on deaf school children. The study initially was supposed to be, were they better being taught orally or in sign language? But the most important thing that came out of the research turned out to be that the chances of the child's success were mostly down to the teacher's expectations of them. And that was the most important part in their success. And I thought that was really interesting, because that will, cross over to all teachers in all subjects. The important thing is having a high expectation of a child and letting them believe that they can achieve.
There's so many studies out that teacher efficacy, like believing that they can teach and that students can learn, is the highest effect size on student learning above anything else.
Before I was in Ohio, I taught in North Carolina in a school that had been taken over. It was in turnaround, and the University of Virginia was in charge of educating our principal and kind of making the rules. So we were a failing school, and I was able to turn our science scores from 14% pass rate when I got there to 78% college and career ready by the time I left. And I think the most important part was spending the first 2 weeks of school convincing them that they were scientists. Because once they were convinced that they were scientists, then when something wasn't working, it wasn't because they didn't know, it was because it wasn't working, and they were able to advocate for themselves. So if the way I taught it didn't work, instead of it being like, oh, well, I'm dumb, I just don't understand.
Shifting their perspective.
I don't think you taught me that the right way. Can you explain it in a different way? And giving them that verbiage to be able to ask those questions is really what the major change was.
When you talk about the, explain it in a little bit different way, can be hard. But if nothing else, even just showing multiple ways to do the same thing, and hopefully that could reduce some of the shame, or it could also help some other people. Oh, I never thought about it that way. And so I don't know, to me, I'd like to think that it also helps with some flexibility in thinking and learning. But yeah, if they're only taught the one way, it does make that hard. And then if somebody only knows how to explain it one way, that also can make
I think the awareness is important, isn't it? I think if a teacher is aware that various conditions exist, then they have got a better chance, even if they don't know anything more than the fact that it exists. Because I think that on its own can make a difference. With aphantasia and hyperaphantasia, just to raise the fact that it exists for teaching environments will help teachers to be at least aware that there's a difference, and they may then spot something in a child and go, oh, hang on a minute, what's going on with this child? And then then they make the effort to find an individual way of teaching that child. I think the ways of teaching are less important than the awareness that it exists. They just assume you can see what they can see. So I think the vast majority of educators, no matter how inclusive they're trying to be, and it's not just aphantasia, obviously with autism and ADHD and dyslexia, and there's so many things there. But if a person doesn't know about the condition, they can't make allowances for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I agree that awareness is probably the biggest thing, at least the biggest place to start.
Definitely.
So do you guys have any ideas on the best way to spread this information to make more people aware of it?
It's a hard one, because even like in the school, like when I did my placement and stuff, I tell people I have aphantasia, they just look at me as if I've got, like, what is that? Like that, like I'm just making up some random
horrible disease.
thing, like you have to sit there and explain it to every single person every single time. It gets exhausting.
I did a presentation to about 90 art students. It was a regional art show competition kind of thing. And so I was the guest speaker, and I talked about this. And so I had them draw a made up word, like spirot was one of the words, and it's like, so for those who, most of them probably didn't have aphantasia, right? But what it did was present them with a word that was unknown to them, and then they had to draw it from their imagination. What it allowed to happen was give them the same sense that I have all the time, which is a blank mind, so to speak. There they are with this word, and they like, what do they do with it? So it was really interesting to see what they came up with, and they used obviously parts of language that they know that, was familiar to them. So I think, some of those things, if you can get it out in kind of massive groups, like I could see, like Lindsay, I could see you developing some kind of, staff development. It doesn't have to be, just Lindsay, it could be anybody, but here in the United States, we do a lot of staff development, and that I think would be a really key thing. And did you were involved with the NEA, Lindsay?
I'm one of their 35 for 35. So they're featuring 35 educators with disabilities for the 35th celebration years of ADA. I'm more than happy to start including it in the professional development that I'm doing. So right now, my NEA goal is to increase general ed teachers' understanding of neurodivergence, because the NEA did do a study that at best, general ed teachers receive one class during their pre-service time around disabilities and special education, which is
very frustrating for
so
us.
frustrating. I actually have all the coursework for special ed, but refuse to go get my license because I believe that general ed students deserve the understanding, whether they're high masking, whether they're high academic achievers, but, have a lot of outside needs. And so that's really where my focus is right now, is increasing the education of general ed teachers, because and again, this is very specific to America, but as we lose funding and as IDEA and 504 is on the battleground right now, general ed teachers need to be prepared, and they need to be able to educate all students. And so it shouldn't be this disconnect of special ed and gen ed, because there's a lot of intersecting needs. Like, I am twice exceptional too, so I spent my educational career in gen ed being looked at as lazy or defiant or whatever it was, because I wasn't regurgitating the information in the way that I understood it. So, like, why can you have this conversation, this intellectual conversation, and then you just go not do any of the work when we need you to? And all of these things could be fixed with education. And so that is my goal, and anybody else that's interested in jumping on and helping me with it, I am more than happy to recruit as many people that I can.
I know in my field, we have a lot of continuing education hours that we need to do. I think at the K-12 level, there's a lot of like in-services, teacher, that kind of, training and stuff. And so I really am personally a fan of approaching things from like multiple angles. So like, I remember once contacting a publisher of a book that I was using to see if it was available in alternative formats for a student. And I remember having some discussions with that publisher person I was talking about. They mentioned the author. Oh, this author is so flexible. They could blah, 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 and maybe future editions. I said, what? I said, oh my gosh, can I just throw out one other suggestion? Then, I kind of threw out a suggestion of just like, this is something that hasn't been written about. It needs to be addressed. I'm just going to throw it out there, because if you are with a publishing company that works with all these counselors, maybe you might be able to have influence in some way, that they specialize in education and they work with those authors who, do those textbooks and stuff that, maybe they can include a small section in the future to increase awareness. Maybe there's some presentations or NEA presentations or other type of, equivalent, whatever people's discipline is. Like I'm doing a presentation for counselors for our state association at the end of the month. And it is on aphantasia and some of the implications for counselors and what might be helpful to know. And because I've never seen it in a textbook ever for us. Now, it doesn't mean that isn't out there. It just might be a textbook I'm not familiar with, or that it isn't starting to be thought about to include in future textbooks. And even, it sounds strange to say, but even like some of the kids, there's so many social media platforms and so many individuals, including ways that kids can speak up and share their experiences, as well as individuals like us. Like I heard about this from a social media platform. So I'm sure there's some other avenues as well, but hopefully when there's a lot of different ways of approaching it, then it's reaching more of the masses.
I'm also working on writing a book. It's called When That Kid Becomes the Teacher, and just all about the journey of, like if you told my kindergarten teacher that I was a teacher now, I'm sure she'd drop dead. And so, I'm more than happy to try to like work this in, because I think it did affect my childhood a lot. Again, like every year we were writing things in the air and I was just performing, just another layer of masking on top of ADHD and autism. It was just something I didn't even realize I was masking again. But I think that you're right we need to get in there into pre-service education programs, because it needs to be just normal that gen ed teachers learn about neurodivergent learners in general. And this feels like it's part of that same idea, because I feel like it's hard once teachers are in the classroom to kind of play catch up. So how do we influence policy before they get there so that they're ready to go once they're done?
I think some problem is with neurodivergent learners, most of them are because of because of a medical condition, they would say. So it comes from the medical field. And even, I don't know how it is in America, but in Australia, even when I've said to some doctors that I've asked about aphantasia, they don't even know about it. So if doctors don't know about aphantasia, therapists don't know about aphantasia, how are the school community going to know? Even though it's not a disability per se, it should just be known about more within the medical community, I think, and then it will flow down into the education and all those other places.
I completely agree. I was just going to add, and my background is actually in marketing and advertising, and without question, word of mouth is the way to market and advertise, especially with the benefit of social media. And when you want to create awareness about something, just talking about it to anyone who will listen is usually the best way to get the word out. I've started talking to my grandkids about this ever since I learned about it. I was so worried that I'm just assuming they think like me, see like me, feel like me, know like me. And here I'm just teaching all these things. And I've had a lot of experiences recently since I found out about this, that is not the case. We're miscommunicating to each other just constantly. So I've been trying to ask questions and learn, what do you see? How do you feel? And so we've talked about aphantasia and being able to see pictures in your head a lot with the grandkids. And so it is such a wide spectrum. Watching some of the interviews that you've done, Shane, I've just been mind blown at the spectrum of what people are able to see and what they're able to do with visualization in their mind. Everything from nothing at all, and then all the things they've been able to use to compensate for that, from stick figures and outlines to full on images and movies in their brain. And if we're having this really wide, vast spectrum of experiences when we're learning things and seeing the world and doing things in the world, and also the way we're treating other people and expecting things of other people and communicating with other people and stuff, it is very likely that we are just woefully, missing the mark when we're doing a lesson that is just geared towards, I think you're all learning the way I learn. I think you're all seeing the way I see. I think you can all do the assignment that I'm giving you because I can do it and it's easy for me. I think the more we talk about this subject to the general public, and I've been doing that so much, I can't tell you how many people I've had take that test and look at the Apple graph. And it is shocking how many people in my life just do not see things the way I see them, don't think about them the way I think about them, don't learn the way that I learn. And it has altered the way that I do life and the way I communicate with people. And I think that's what the world needs. I don't think we should put all the pressure on teachers or educators or legislators. They are a small percentage of the picture. We need to get awareness out to the general public so that the kids growing up know there's a spectrum of understanding, of personality, of visualization, of everything under the sun. And you need to have grace for the people around you. You need to have patience. You need to be able to show things in multiple ways, teach things with every tool, not just the one tool that works best for you, and just do a better job of making this something that parents want taught in schools, that kids are asking for specifically. It's going to come from the bottom up. If we're waiting for our politicians or even educators and leaders, to make the decision to make this available in schools, we're going to be waiting a really long time. I think we need to make people aware of it and talk about it as much as we can and get parents asking for it, get kids asking for it.
Excellent.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
So I'm going to throw out something like, it's my understanding that they don't see aphantasia as a disability. Am I misunderstanding that or not?
Yeah, it is not considered a disability or a disorder. It's just considered a difference.
Different.
Quirk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And if it was considered a disability or disorder, there probably would be a lot more awareness of it. And as it is right now, I think a lot of times it just kind of gets dismissed, forgotten about easily and not implemented. Like it's just, for some reason, it doesn't carry the weight that I feel like it should.
It's interesting you say that. Like in our program is a pretty standard program for the number of credits that students need to prepare them for taking the exams and all the things that will help them become a counselor when they were done, when they graduate and stuff. But I always kind of joke, like, if our program taught everything we would love to teach, it'd be a 150 credit hour program. I don't think it always, for me, doesn't always take that much time to educate. But I wish I'd known there would have been so many other things I would have adapted much sooner as a clinical mental health counselor, and even some of the classes that I had taught. And not that what I didn't work well, because it did work well, but I would have loved to have had a wider range for more inclusivity or different approaches for learning.
Exactly. There definitely needs to be two types of things, or 2 or 3 different methods of presentation for the same thing going on at the same time.
Right.
Multisensory teaching.
Yes. And that made me think about what Sarah had said earlier about the presentation, and maybe at the very beginning, it's, this kind of disclaimer kind of thing, if teachers can, present that kind of thing with, some of you are going to, be able to do it this way. If you're struggling with that, see me, and maybe there's a small group, we can try a different approach, or something, and maybe the same thing with, testing. Maybe testing isn't going to work for you, but you can show me that, this information in a different way.
My thought is, rather than waiting till you discover there is a child in the room that has complete and total aphantasia, just start with the assumption that there's a spectrum that is so broad that it's almost universal. And every kid in the class is seeing things differently. So why start out with let's see if you can do this and let's see who can do that. Let's start out with let's have an audible input. Let's have a visual input. Let's have a descriptive input. Let's do this lesson in a way that no matter where you're on the spectrum, and not just with aphantasia, but with so many other different things that come into play when learning, like that your chance of having something that works for you is built into the program. It's just built into the lesson. There's different ways. Hands-on learning. I love hands-on learning. There's just people that learn in different ways. Why not present every lesson with, let's cover all the bases, and when there's something new, let's try to add that in.
I would only say that the burden of doing that on teachers would be really big, to design every lesson to do that, so I'm not sure. I'm just picturing, like, if I would have to take every lesson I do and then present it in all those different ways. And I mean, a lot of it, because, with in art, I'm already demonstrating, I am talking as I do it, but to present it in other ways, I'm not sure if I could adapt everything. And then I'm thinking about, like, how does a history teacher adapt every lesson,
Saying that, I think we need to stop getting upset with educators and be upset with the system, because first of all, teachers aren't paid to do that, and they're not given the supports to do it. And I think a lot of times, especially in our society right now, we have this idea that, like, the teachers where the buck stops, but there are people making far more money than me that are making the decisions and not even having any interaction with a student. People are always like, well, why don't you leave the classroom? You could do so many other things. But if I do, then all of that knowledge is lost from in the classroom. And that means one less child is going to have a teacher in front of them that understands them, that was them, that can reflect and pivot the way they need. And so that's one of the big flaws in America. As soon as you become a teacher who is successful, they're like, you've got to become the principal. You've got to become all of these other things. And we're removing our educators that can do those things. For me, pivoting between different things is easy for me because that's how I think, right? Like, my disability of thinking all over the place becomes this performative masterpiece in the classroom. And my coworkers often remind me, my brain doesn't work like that. But we can't just place the blame on educators alone, because we are not making the kind of money. It's just not there. The system.
I think the nature of diversity in general means that it's never going to be a perfect system. You're never going to cater for everyone, but if you can cater for as many people as possible, you're doing a good job. You're never going to be able to cater for the whole vast masses
and there are
of diversity out there.
A lot of amazing educators who sincerely would like adapt or, revise if they knew, because there are a lot of amazing teachers out there that do the best with what they have. And sometimes they might not know.
That goes back to what Sarah said too, is maybe it's more of an awareness out to the general public, which would include, teachers and therapists and those who do the visualization techniques kind of a thing. And doctors that don't know and stuff, so, and maybe that's the best approach.
I think education is definitely, I just get scared when we try to throw another thing on teachers' plates. 100% believe that education should be personalized. Absolutely. But then at the same page, teachers are barely surviving right now. Like the burnout rate, the amount of people that are coming after us. What books are we allowed to read? I obviously that's an American problem, but like there's just so many things that we're barely keeping our heads above water to think that they're going to be able to simultaneously without, and I'm not saying that no teachers can, there's a lot of amazing teachers that do personalized learning, but they also have a supportive admin, and it's also a systematic project from the district.
I totally agree. And that's why I think one of the big things with awareness is not just to the teachers, but to the students. Because if the students know, if a teacher becomes aware of this, have an hour discussion about it, and now all your students know about it. And then they go home and they tell their parents about it, and now their parents know about it. And then maybe some of these solutions can start to evolve. But
this would also be interesting to add into like when you teach 5 senses in school. It'd be like a simple part to add to the health assignment, right? So we're gonna do like, what can you taste, right? Like I did a program at OSU this summer where they ordered jelly beans that were like the different flavor than the color, and you had to like describe the experience. It was real weird. If we could put it on social media where you're like, hey, try this out with your students this year, it would be a really simple push if you have the right platform to put out there, just as, one of those get to know you, beginning of the year things like.
Yeah. Great idea.
Would you need to have any type of, for lack of a better word, support for the student who just kind of freaks out? Because on some of my online groups that I'm in, there's so many people that are just like devastated when they find out that they have this, I mean, like,
totally such a good point.
In my mind, I feel like you don't even say what you're doing. You just do it. And then afterwards, it's not a disability. You just talk about, here's a scale. Here's where you are on the scale. All that means is, you might need to ask some of these questions, or you might need to ask some of these questions. We don't need to label it as like you're disordered, because I'm sure there's a lot of strengths that come from having aphantasia. Like
it's for me, I think it's the feeling like, why am I so different? Because you are going to be, if there's only 3 to 4% of us that have this in childhood, though, it's like, it's going to be, I don't want to be different. I want to be the rest of the group, and that's I don't know why we have to, follow that kind of, thinking, because that needs to go away. But it is, I want to be included. I want to be part of the team. I want to be like everybody else, kind of a thing. And so differences aren't necessarily embraced, especially in, like middle school and stuff like that. So that's the only concern I have with it.
I have to say that since I was introduced to this, I have talked to so many people, and I am amazed at how many people I've met that have it and didn't know it, or have some degree of it. And it's just not a conversation people are having. Everyone thinks their experience is what everyone else is experiencing. And I think that the more this does become an awareness for people, the more it will become evident that it isn't a small percentage, that on the spectrum, there's just a wide array of experience that could benefit from changes in the way the education system works. And I mean, I know it's a gross oversimplification of the concept, but to me, it seems a bit like one of the big defining differences is that some people have a picture in their head while other people have to see that picture outside their head. And in education, if you can present a picture outside their head, now we have a universal experience. Now everybody can see this is what we're talking about. We don't need you to draw it up in your head. In a classroom, let's not depend on a child being capable of doing that to grasp a concept or finish an assignment or whatever. Let's just start introducing some more images and some more video and things like that, which is so readily available. With AI, you could generate anything in a touch of a button, you know? We should be able to create images that compensate and supplement the experience of people who are not able to put that picture in their own mind without too much trouble, without too much legislation, without a whole lot of changing to the lesson plan. Just give them some images to go on and they're going to be fine, especially if you let them take those images home so they can reference them later and not just, you know, in that moment and then recall it later.
You know, I want to say I really appreciate this discussion because it is nice to talk with other people who have experienced a phenomenon or the other end of the phenomenon. Just grateful for this opportunity to be able to speak and share ideas and talk openly and, you know, not necessarily a wrong or a right per se, just like, hey, let's just explore. And I appreciated that. Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
you.
Shane.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shane.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, each of you, so much for your time. I thought it was really fascinating. I'm so glad we had so many different perspectives and different opinions and different areas of the world and everything. It was a fantastic discussion. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us, and share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.